Hello, my name is Gradius, and a great man named Karl von Clausewitz said that in war, more than anywhere else, things do not turn out as we expect. Join me as we discover the lessons to be learned in the weird, odd, and sometimes crazy military engagements in unusual battles of history. Our topic for today is the Battle of Karansebes, where we will be looking at how an army was defeated and an emperor humiliated by a keg of schnapps. The year is 1788, and Austrian Emperor Joseph II has been on the throne for 8 years, and, like most Habsburg emperors, he craves military glory. The problem is that he has little to no military background and thus no idea how to lead troops in battle. Seeing that expansion against his Prussian neighbors to the north was impossible, the only viable option for expansion was south, towards the mighty Ottoman Empire. The Austrian Emperor puts together an army of 100,000 men under his personal command, and marches to confront his Islamic foes in the fall of 1788. There was a big issue in the Austrian army, however. The empire was made up of many different nationalities: Hungarians, Serbians, Croatians, Germans, Italians, and many more that comprised this 100,000 strong force. The problem was that many of these people hated each other with a passion. This was further compounded by the fact that the officers in charge of the men could have fixed this problem if they weren't aristocrats and politicians who had paid their way to obtain their posts. So, overall, you have a large army comprising of many different nationalities who hate each other, being commanded by rich politicians who don't really care about their men, and being led by an emperor with no military experience. And thus, the stage was set for disaster. On September 17th, the Austrian army neared the town of Karansebes, which is about 329 kilometers or 204 miles from the modern city of Bucharest. While the army pitched camp for the evening, the emperor sent out some light cavalry, called hussars, that's these guys here, to scout out for the Ottomans. The hussars didn't find any Ottomans, but instead encountered some Wallachian gypsies, who sold them some barrels of schnapps, and the horsemen proceeded to get drunk. Sometime later, a few Austrian soldiers found the inebriated hussars, and naturally wanted to join in the merriment. The hussars wanted the schnapps for themselves, however, and a fight broke out. In order to scare off the horsemen, one soldier shouted out that the Ottomans were coming. The drunk hussars, not knowing any better, quickly mounted up and fled back to camp, shouting that the enemy was coming upon them. Now, galloping into camp in the dead of night, shouting that the enemy is coming, and causing bleary-eyed soldiers to wake up from their sleep is a disastrous combination. Very soon, sleep-deprived soldiers were running about in the dark, trying to make sense of the situation. One German officer attempted to stop the madness by shouting "Halt!" in German, but the soldiers, who mostly didn't speak a lick of German, thought he had said the word Allah. It also didn't help that some of the horses had broken free from their corral, and in the dark they were mistaken for Ottoman cavalry, so this sowed even more panic. A commander of one of the cannons, hearing the supposed enemy cavalry, ordered his gun crew to fire their cannon in the dark, which caused an even bigger catastrophe. Soldiers were running everywhere, shooting wildly at shadows in the dark, which most of them were their fellow soldiers. Others wildly bayoneted their comrades in the dark out of panic. Even the emperor could not stop the frantic rush of men, and he barely managed to escape the scene. When morning dawned, it was a sight to behold. Out of 100,000 men, the Austrian army had lost 10,000, with the rest fleeing back to Austria. There hadn't even been one single Ottoman soldier for miles. The Ottomans did reach Karansebes about 3 days later, killed the wounded that were left, and went on to take several fortifications from the Austrians. As for Emperor Joseph II, he made it back to Vienna humiliated. He did let other qualified generals take charge, who did succeed against the Ottomans, but the emperor was done with war. He instead turned to passing unsuccessful reforms in an attempt to keep his unstable empire together, but they were largely unpopular. Joseph II died just 2 years after the Battle of Karansebes. His tombstone reads, "Here lies Joseph II, who failed in all he undertook." What lessons can we take from this battle? First is to make sure that the officers can control their troops. With so many different nationalities present, experienced officers could have maintained peace, but instead it was politicians who only cared more about their posts instead of the men under their command. Second, and more importantly, is the fact that an emperor with no prior experience led the army, instead of trusting his generals who knew what they were doing. And lastly, it all came down to a barrel of schnapps that provided the spark for this tragedy. This has been Unusual Battles in History. Thank you very much for